Greetings, Warlords. Welcome back to Warhammer 40,000 Conquest, the card game, played on Iridio.net. Today, we have a match between Farsight, played by yours truly, from the Tau faction, against Old One Eye from the Tyranids faction, played by Echo. And would you look at this, editing Coalback has figured out how to overlay images. So now you don't have to look up the cards on Conquest DB when I talk about them. Well done, me. So, Farsight's gimmick is all about deep strike cards, but more specifically he's about putting his attachments into reserve and then deep striking them. You can think of him as a bit of an epistolary as well. Instead of running a bunch of different units, he's just going to put all the attachments in his deck and get money from them. On the other side of the table we have Old One Eye. Old One Eye has the ability to heal himself for half of the damage on him, rounded up, once per round when he readies. And since my opponent is playing Tyranids, he also has a Synapse unit, so we should talk about that as well. This Synapse unit is Praetorian Shadow, one of the Apoca Synapse units. While your Warlord is at the same planet or adjacent to the Synapse, it gets +1 attack, and you can exhaust the Synapse to prevent 1 damage from being assigned to your Warlord. So the +1 attack is the main thing we're interested in here, since that's going to move Old One Eye up from a 2 attack to a 3 attack unit, which is pretty strong. This game is being played on the Traxxas sector, if you haven't noticed already, and the Apoca errata and bans are in effect for this one. So we now have the most important decision of any game. Do we decide to mulligan our opening hand, or do we keep it? In our hand, we do have the Borkan Set pledge, which will allow us to draw 1 attachment from our deck of our choice, following some restrictions. We also have a Beleaguered Garrison and 2 Deathstorm drop pods, so we're looking very set up in terms of how powerful our deep strike cards are going to be. And of course we also have Farsight's signature support. Since it has the preparation keyword, it always starts in our opening hand. This is generally a pretty good opening hand, but our initial command game is going to be a bit weak, as we will only have the attachment from Borkan Set in order to take advantage of Beleaguered Garrison. In the end, I do keep my opening hand, and now we wait to see whether or not my opponent keeps his opening hand. My opponent also declines to mulligan his opening hand, and he reveals that he has an adaptative Thorax Swarm, which will allow him to put up to 2 cards, as well as the adaptative Thorax Swarm itself on the bottom of his deck, and then draw the same number of cards that he put on the bottom. It is now the first deploy turn, so I deploy my pledge to draw an attachment from my deck. And annoyingly, I found out that I've accidentally implemented the card wrong, as it is only searching the top 6 cards of my deck instead of the whole deck. I probably lazily copied the code from Earthcast Technician. Oh well, it's not a big deal because there's an ion rifle there anyway, which is what I wanted. My opponent plays a Pulsating Carapace onto Old One Eye. This attachment reduces all damage taken by Old One Eye to 2. And he can exhaust the attachment in order to heal 2 damage from the Warlord, or to infest the planet that it is currently at. So this makes Old One Eye much more fearsome in combat, and I'm going to have to be very careful when I try to kill him, as if I'm not, he might heal 3 damage from his reaction, and then heal 2 damage with his attachment, going from having only 1 health left to being at full health in 1 turn. I now play my support fleet, which is my signature support. This allows me to rally 16 for 4 cards 4 attachments rather, and place them onto the support fleet. Then, every deploy phase, I'll get to take 1 back from the attachment and put it into my hand. We get some interesting attachments off of the support fleet rally, the most interesting of which being the Dawn Blade, which is my signature attachment. It attaches to my warlord and gives sweep 1, and also I can, as a combat action, exhaust it to either deep strike a card or to move a card from one planet to another. So next turn I'll be able to take this attachment off of my support fleet, put it into my hand, and then deploy it onto my warlord. Or I can deep strike it instead if I want to take advantage of the 1 command icon from Beleaguered Garrison. The remaining attachments are a Pulsar Impact Field, a Positional Relay, and an Ion Rifle. So we'll see which ones I need during the game, or which order I take them in. But we should remember that all the costs of the attachments are basically 1 cost, because I put them into reserve for 1, and then I'll deep strike them for 0, thanks to Farsight. So even though the Pulsar Impact Field is a 2 cost, it's functionally exactly the same cost as the Ion Rifle. Alright, now he plays a Crush of Sky Slashers to the first planet. Now Crush of Sky Slashers is a 1 cost, 0 command, 1 attack, 2 health unit with a flying keyword and reaction. After a combat round begins at this planet, deal 1 damage to an enemy armor unit with printed cost 2 or lower. So in particular, this means my Farsight Vanguards, which are my signature unit, they will be able to be hit by the Crush of Sky Slashers. So as I also have flying, it will be pretty hard for my Farsight Vanguard to deal with him without some serious attachments. And now would be a good time to talk about the planets in this game. So at the first planet, we have Planum, and then after that we have Carnif, Atrox Prime, Taurus, and Balus. So of note is that it's entirely possible to win the game using just the first 3 planets, since they all have a blue technology speciality. So this could be a pretty fast game. Otherwise, what could happen is someone takes Carnif, Atrox Prime, and Taurus to win on planet 4. It's also very possible. In the meantime, I put out my Beleaguered Garrison, which will have all of my cards in reserve be considered a command icon while resolving command struggles. And then he plays an Emergent Cultist. Emergent Cultists are another very good combat unit. They cost 2, have 1 command icon, 3 attack, and 2 health. And reaction, after this unit enters play, exhaust the target enemy support card. In this case, I don't have any supports which would matter about being exhausted, so that's not really a problem. But the stats of the unit are still very good. So he's looking very well set up on planet 1 here. I put an Ion Rifle into reserve at Carnif. So this is 1 command icon, so I'm now winning command at that planet. And now he passes his deploy turn. So I have an important choice to make here, which is whether or not to deploy the Salem Pioneer and then try to protect it. Now, there's not really any point in not protecting the Salem Pioneers. I don't have any more cards which should be better at command than it. So then the question is, where do I deploy it? It's probably Taurus, because if he triggers the battle ability Taurus, he won't get anything, because I have less units than he does. And now I also pass. So there's a few ideas here about where to commit. He is very likely going to commit to his Warlord and his Synapse of Taurus, which will get him 2 cards and 2 resources worth of command struggles, and it will importantly block me of my +2 resources from my Salem Pioneer. But he also might not do that, because I could go to Carnif, and then I'll get 1 card, 1 resource, and then I'll trigger Taurus with Carnif's battle ability. So therefore, and also if he goes to Carnif with his Warlord, he'll get to trigger Taurus to use Balus to discard card from my hand, so then the extra resources wouldn't really mean too much. So in the end, I decide I'm going to commit with Farsight to Taurus, in the hopes that he commits his Warlord to Carnif and just commits with Synapse to Taurus. Annoyingly, he does commit both his Warlord and his Synapse to Taurus, so I do not get the command struggle there. Oh well. And now we have the combat phase. So there's not anything particularly interesting going on here, since I can't fight for planet 1 and he's going to easily kill me at Taurus. So therefore I'll just be waiting for the combat phase to end and not really talking too much during it. I attack the Synapse just to try and get a bit of damage on it. Maybe I'll be able to kill it at some point in the future, although since it has 5 health it's going to be pretty hard. That, and it doesn't really like to go to the same planet as the Warlord, so that also doesn't make it very easy to kill. And we're now in the deploy phase again. So I have drawn, since the last command struggle, a positional relay, a fusion cascade defiance, and a data analyzer. So these are all attachments, so I can put them into reserve in order to win command struggles at planets, and they'll trigger my Deathstorm drop pods. I've also moved the Dawn Blade off of my support fleet into my hand. So I'm looking pretty set up to win a huge number of command struggles this turn, unless he's got a lot of Toxic Venom for absorb motions in his hand. For the rest of the deploy phase, it's quite simple. I'm mostly just putting my attachments into reserve at a bunch of planets in order to wing the command struggles there, thanks to Beleaguered Garrison giving them a command icon. Meanwhile, my opponent has put a Lurking Hormigaunt onto the first planet, that's his signature unit, and he's put a Strangleweb Termagant onto the last planet, which basically has no attack and no ability this game. But it does have one command icon and only costs 1. I make a slightly strange choice here and put my Dawn Blade into reserve, despite it only costing 0. The idea here was I wasn't really sure if I wanted to actually commit to Eluith, because I thought there was a reasonable chance that he commits himself to Eluith in order to prevent me from winning a command struggle there. So therefore I would want the extra command icon from the Dawn Blade being in reserve, even though it costs 1 extra resource. Since A, now he doesn't know what the card is, and B, if he does commit there, then he's not going to get the cards from the command struggle. He ends up committing the Warlord to the first planet anyway though, so it didn't end up being necessary. Combat phase begins. I only have an ion rifle in reserve at Carnif, so I am once again unable to fight for the planet. Oh well. Next round I'll have some much better combat units. I've got Commander Bravestorm, and I can put a XV-25 Stealth Squad into reserve at the next planet, so I should be able to win that one, depending on what he has in his hand. I also forgot here that I have 2 Deathstorm drop pods, which would have both triggered upon deep striking the ion rifle. So even though I can only use Commander Farsight's ability once per round to gain 2 resources, so deep striking won't get me any more extra resources, I could have killed the Crush of Sky Slashers for free, essentially. Or at least made him use shield cards on protecting it. Regardless, he ends up triggering Eluith with Karn to take a card from the top 3 cards of his deck. And now we have a battle Eluith, which I'm going to win pretty easily. I also deep strike my Dawn Blade in order to get 2 resources. So I'll be heading into the next round of 6 resources. And I'll search a card at the top of my deck with Eluith. I end up taking a recon drone here. While it's not a combat unit, and I do need combat units at the moment, I currently already have enough money to afford all the combat units in my hand, so therefore the recon drone seems like the best choice, as it will allow me to draw 2 cards from Eliwith, guaranteed more or less, as I assume he's going to send his Warlord to Planet 1 next round. I could also have taken Daring Assault, but it's only 1 shield. I probably won't make a difference here. I'd rather try to gamble on getting some higher shield cards, like my attachment cards from the deck. Granted, Daring Assault could also be used to move some attachments over from Taurus and Barlas to Atrox Prime for the last battle. However, I've got the Dawn Blade, so I can already move them if I need to. Okay, now we've moved on to the deploy phase again. So for my support fleet, I choose to take the repulsor impact field off of it. This is because Old One Eye's attachment, the pulsating carapace, reduces all damage taken to 2, and repulsor impact field deals damage in instances of 2, making whichever unit gets the repulsor impact field very good at taking on Old One Eye himself, while my other units should be able to deal with the remaining cards, like the Crush of Sky Slashers and the Lurking Horngod. So I play out Commander Bravestorm to Atrox Prime. He is 3 cost 1 command icon to attack 4 health and reaction after you attach a card to him. You draw 1 card, limit once per phase. So I'll be able to put my repulsor impact field on him, and then I'll draw 1 card. So that's pretty good. Meanwhile, my opponent plays a regeneration, and my opponent plays a Crush of Sky Slashers and a regeneration onto his Crush of Sky Slashers. So now it's a 1 attack, 1 attack, 2 health unit with plus 2 health, so 4 health, and it can regen by using the regeneration, 2 health, and it has flying, and it does 1 damage to a unit with cost 2 or less each round. Meanwhile, I'm not really doing anything worth talking about here. I've put out a recon drone to Eliwith, which is going to win me the command struggle there, and I'm just dumping all of my Deep Strike cards on Atrox Prime, since every time I Deep Strike a card, I'll trigger 2 Deathstorm drop pods, which will end up being 2 damage total. So right now, as I have 3 Deep Strike cards at Atrox Prime, that's 6 potential damage. Meanwhile, he's put out a Spreading Genestealer Wood to Barlas to tie my command there, so I will not be winning command there unless I send my Warlord there, but I need my Warlord at Atrox Prime to win the battle. I also put out a Violar Marksman to Ferrin, which will get me 2 resources, which secures the resources I need in order to be able to deep strike my XV-25 stealth squad. We are once again at the committing Warlord step, so I'm basically forced to commit my Warlord to Atrox Prime here, since he will win the game if I do not win this planet. Meanwhile, he's probably going to go to Atrox Prime with his Warlord, since that will get him. I won't win him the command struggle, but he will be bringing 2 formidable combat units with him. And the Praetorian Shadow either wants to be next to his Warlord or at the same planet, since it will give his Warlord +1 attack while it is in either of those cases. Therefore, the Praetorian Shadow is almost certainly going to go to planet 2, as he probably doesn't want to risk it getting killed at Atrox Prime. And that is indeed what ends up happening. I managed to draw 2 shield cards with my recon drone at Eliwith, so it looks like taking the recon drone over the Daring Assault was the correct move after all. And we are now at the Deep Strike step, and this time I have forgotten to use my Dawn Blade on Commander Farsight in order to move a deep card in reserve at either Taurus or Barlas to Atrox Prime. Whoops. Very sloppy play by me, but oh well. Can't get 'em all, can't always be perfect. So now I'm just deep striking a bunch of random cards. The Repulsor Impact Field goes on to Commander Bravestorm in order to draw me a card, and he will be a very difficult opponent to kill. For all of this, I'm also dealing 1 damage every time I Deep Strike. Well, 2 damage actually, but in instances of 1 damage to an enemy armor unit. So I'm going to be able to kill his Crush of Sky Slashers here if he doesn't expend a huge number of shield cards, since he will not get an option to use his regeneration. Meanwhile, my XV25 Stealth Squad is getting a Fusion Cascade Defiance to give it +1 attack and +1 health, so to be able to survive 1 swing from Old One Eye. And I do manage to kill both of the Crush of Sky Slashers with just Deathstorm Drop Pods and Fusion Cascade Defiance. Interestingly, we saw that he discarded a a Ferocious Strength as a shield, which would have given his Warlord Brutal. So that's a slightly risky sign. It could mean that he has a second copy of Ferocious Strength that doesn't need the first one, or he was just really trying to save the Crush of Sky Slashers. Not sure yet. We'll find out during the combat. Meanwhile, he has the option to play Overrun, but he does not decide to, which suggests that he doesn't have it, so that makes me feel much better about my chances of winning the game. Well, winning the combat, rather. There's a small micro play that I would like to point out here. I could attack with Farsight against Old One Eye and then sweep one to the Lurking Horngaunt, which would get 1 more damage out of Farsight compared to if he just attacks Old One Eye when the Lurking Horngaunt's already dead. But there's a small problem with that, which is that since the Ferocious Strength was discarded as a shield, I suspect that he still has another copy. Otherwise, he probably wouldn't do that. Therefore, if I did that, the 1 damage from Lurking Horngaunt would move to Old One Eye, so he'd have 3 damage on him. He'd have 2 attack by base, +1 from Praetorian Shadow, giving +1 attack. And then if he played Brutal Strength, he'd gain Brutal, so he'd be attacking for 6, which could kill either of my army units, and he knows that I do not have my free shielder since it's already in play. So therefore it's best to attack with one of my other units against the Lurking Horngaunt, so that he cannot use Brutal Strength. This combat round, anyway. Now we're just swinging at each other, not much to talk about here. He's going to take 4 damage on his Warlord from my attacks, and I'm going to take 3 damage. We come to the end of the combat round. Interestingly, he decides not to use Old One Eye's reaction to heal himself, which makes me think that yes, he definitely does have Ferocious Strength, and he is going to use it. I choose to retreat my Warlord just because I don't want it getting bloodied, and even if one of my units dies, I should be able to shield the other one well enough to win the game. Win the combat, rather. And there is the Ferocious Strength. And he takes out my XV25 Stealth Squad. So now it is just Commander Bravestorm against Old One Eye, but Commander Bravestorm does have his attachment, the Repulsor Impact Field, to deal damage when Old One Eye attacks him, so I'm still feeling generally pretty good about this combat. And now he reveals that he actually did have an overrun all the time. So that means that he's going to rout my 1 remaining unit and then he'll win the combat. He gets a little confused with the controls here, as he believes he's in the take a combat turn step, but he's actually in the retreat step. So he accidentally retreats his Warlord, but it's not a big deal. I can move it back with a debug command. And there we go. Not one of my greatest games. I certainly made quite a few misplays there. Not deep striking the iron rifle earlier for 2 damage was certainly a misplay. And this round I could have used the Dawn Blade in order to move another attachment over for extra damage. I think if I had to play this game again, I would have mulliganed my opening hand, because while it is a very strong command hand, it is going to be very difficult for me to defeat his walls at the first planets if he decides to go to them. So therefore I'd need to swap out some of my cards with better combat units. Alright, that will be all for this video. I'll see you in the next one.